Okay. How is everyone this afternoon? We had a great cattle sale. There's great stalls over there. It's been a great day. Something I've been looking forward to, ladies and gentlemen. We've spoken about it for about 3 or 4 years. And as things do, they slip by you. And anyway, we put it all together. We titled it The Way It Was. The whole idea today, ladies and gentlemen, is just to have a bit of a yarn, a bit of history, a bit of banter, a bit of fun, and we'll go from there. So I'll just start out by, my name is Wade Marks. I feel extremely proud, privileged to be asked to be here today to interview 3 very special guests in our community. They don't like to be called legends, and they don't want to be heroes, and they don't want us to put them up on pedestals, and that's not what it's all about. What it's about is just a little bit of history. A lot of us younger people probably wouldn't know a few of these stories or have an appreciation of the way it was back in those days. I feel proud to be able to say that I've known on a personal level all of these 3 guests for the whole of my life. A bit of a call out to Billy Moller. We had a bit of a dry run the other day and Bill was on the panel. Due to some recent health issues, he couldn't be here today. He will be sorely missed. He added a lot to our creation. So we wish you all the best, Bill, and hopefully we might be able to get you back next year. At very late notice, with a quick phone call to Jumbo to get him on board. And of course, Jumbo being Jumbo, he gave me the old, yeah, I can do it, but you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Now, we were desperate, and I said, done. So God only knows what I've done. I've taken one for the team here, Hock and Jake, and Jack. But anyway, thank you very much, Jumbo, for coming on board. And to say the least, to get these 3 together was a little bit like mustering cats. We could get one in the circle, and the other 2 were gone. We'd drop another one in, and the first one was out. But anyway, we've got them all together. Just before I introduce you to our guest today, I would also just like to say that there will be people's properties and people's names. It's not out of any derogatory or disrespectfulness. We just feel yarns wouldn't be yarns if there wasn't a time, place and a person and an error. So there's no disrespectfulness meant by any means whatsoever. We're all just having a bit of fun, and we're really just here to reminisce old times, have a laugh and enjoy each other's company. Now I'll start off with the man directly on my left. Most of you, or all of you, will probably know. His name is John Eilert. And a little bit of a rap sheet on John. He wouldn't give me one, so I had to go and do a bit of homework myself. Born in Claremont, May 1939.
Oh, there we go.
Worked as a ringer, 1954 to 57. In 58 he started with NZ Loans, then went to primaries, Tankfords, PA Fields, Amatil, AMH from 88 to 87, and JBS from 2005 to 2014. John joined the Radio and Show Committee in 1960 and is a life member. Claremont Club, life member. John was still playing indoor cricket in 1988 at the Whitfields Motors Indoor Cricket Centre in the Main Street in Claremont. First started buying cattle in 1960. Taught me how to peel an orange with a pocket knife when I was 4 years old, and always used to tell me in his day there were 17 gates between Claremont and Capella. So have a think about that when you're coming home from Springsure buying cattle. You've had a few days at Springsure, a couple in Emerald, a few in Capella, and then you got 17 gates on the home run back home. The guy in the middle, John Burnett, affectionately known as Jumbo. Born on the 29th of November 1953. Attended primary school at Kilcummin State School. Attended secondary school at Rockhampton Grammar. John has lived all his life in Claremont, spending his youth working at Bendemeer and Mount Douglas, except for 12 months in 1974 when Jumbo and his best mate Bill Cook toured around Australia for a year. John played from 1971 to 1978 for the Claremont Bears and was a member of the 1974 Premiership winning team. John initially intended on studying veterinary science but returned home to Bendemeer after his older brother Graham was killed in a mustering accident. John was the president of the Claremont Cattlemen's Union in the 90s and was involved in the formation of the Resource Management Group, which later evolved to become Property Rights Australia. John and his wife Jan were part of the Nebo consortium that purchased Stanbroke Pastoral Company in 2003. John enjoys gardening, woodwork on his lathe and writing bush poetry. His passion project for the last few years has been working to establish Claremont as a seniors living precinct. Jumbo's been very passionate about that, and it's something that's needed a bit of driving force behind it, so we do congratulate you on your efforts there. John has also been known to liaise with many a young person of today who are interested in starting their career in working in the bush. He seems to attract those sort of people, guides them with advice and direction they need to go to. My far left, I think they call him the granddaddy of them all. His name's Bill Faint. Born in February 1934, took over running Pioneer Station at 19 years of age after his father was killed off a horse while they were mustering at Monteagle. Represented Queensland in Sydney for camp drafting and competed all over Queensland, competing in the same sport. Bred Pole Shorthorn bulls for Kidman and later Western Grazing Company, and changed over to Charolais in the early 60s. Imported the first privately owned purebred quarter horse stallion in the early 1960s, and later importing 4 more. Won an all-round cowboy rodeo title in 1958 right here at Claremont Rodeo. Made multiple hundreds in cricket. The last one, he was well into his 50s. Won a B-grade double tennis championship and was recently awarded an OAM for services in the community. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are 3 guests. And I think I might just kick it off. You know, we hear the words 39 and it seems like a long time ago, but just to get us all in a mindset, Jumbo's a little bit behind these other 2, but just in a mindset, and we might even start off with Jumbo being the younger guy, but just to get a little bit of an idea, I'd just like you to talk us through a day of your junior schooling. So when you were going to primary school in your era, did you walk to school? Did you catch a bus? What did you have for lunch? Where did you go to school? What did you do after school? And what you did for kicks in the afternoons, or whether you had to work, just to give us a little bit of an insight onto how far back these fellas go. So we might just start off with Jumbo, and we'll just let these guys have a little bit of a talk.
Thanks, Wadey. Yeah, I've got one advantage over these other guys. I can still remember stuff.
There was no need of that. No need.
I guess that set the precedence for the day. If you've got a bit of shit to throw, don't be backward and coming forward. That's fine. I started school in 58 at Kilcummin. The Kilcummin blocks had just been drawn. So Kilcummin used to be a massive sheep property. Government in its wisdom cut it up into 13 blocks, sort of 6,000 acres to 13,000 acres, somewhere there. See, I start coming up with figures like that, and there'll be some bastard in this crowd like Bernard Cook will question whether I'm actually right or not. But believe me, I'm younger than you, so my memory is better than yours, so don't criticise, don't question. So we started the school. The school was moved from Blair Athol to, not from Blair Athol, from Myclare to Kilcummin, on the back of, I think Des Altman had a truck. The committee, the local parents, went over to Myclare, jacked it up, put it on a truck, drove it back, and put it on stumps at Kilcummin. That was the start of the school. So you can realise it was a body truck. It wasn't a really big school, but it probably had some of the smartest people in Australia attending at that stage. Grade 1 was pretty simple. There was 5 of us, one teacher school. Our first teacher, Roger Toohey, drove from Brisbane to start at Kilcummin. Parents all went there to meet him on the day. He drove through a sign saying school. He drove through another sign saying Bendemeer, that was where he was going to be living. Ended up in Charters Towers, rang from there. Of course, there was no phones except at the Kilcummin house. He rang the Kilcummin homestead to say he was in Charters Towers, and how the bloody hell did he get to the school from there? And they had to explain to him he had to turn around and come back 300 k's, and then the school would be right there, but we'd be waiting for him and it was all going to be okay. He didn't last long. Our ringers at the time, see, I get carried away. Our ringers at the time liked a bit of fun, and Roger Toohey, they talked to him about living out in the Wild West, and we eat kangaroo, and have you ever tried goanna? Oh yeah, no, I like goanna. So they, early on in his time there, one day they caught a goanna and hung it from the roof, just where the old Land Rover used to drive into the shed. We got home from school and here's a dead goanna hanging there, and old Roger started to go white, thinking these bastards are going to feed this to me, and they did. So that was the first teacher. The first year concert, we always had a school concert at the end of the year, and the first year concert, I guess I must have been one of the star performers, because I can still remember exactly the poem I had to recite. The poem was about a rose. I wonder if anyone knows who lives in the heart of the velvety rose. Is it a goblin, or is it an elf, or is it the queen of the fairies herself? That was my contribution. I don't know where that came from, but it just fell out. Yeah, school was a lot of fun. Next teacher, Roger Toohey. Not Roger Toohey, Noel Wilson, became a good family friend. They used to board at our place and drive us to school each day in an old second-hand Land Rover we had. One day we going across the hill at Mutation. Bob Duckett was coming the other way. Noel Wilson had to drive off the road, hit a rock, knock the four-wheel drive lead, and we couldn't get the car going, so we had to walk to school, and I think he probably carried me. I was only a young fellow, not too heavy I suppose, but he carried me to school, and yeah, I'm sure I must have walked 10 miles that day, but most of it was on Willie's back, thank God. Yeah, that's how we did school. One teacher school, bit of fun. And the only other thing I really remember, there was a big grey box with a radio in it, and each morning we'd listen to Kindy on the air. And, yeah, I guess we learned something, but I don't know what it was. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bill, do you have any recollections of your primary school?
I bet you can't remember a poem you said.
Did you go to school, Bill?
Very, is that coming through? Yep, right, okay. Yep, I went to school just a little bit, but just trying to follow that's really a hard thing for an old fellow like me, isn't it? But yes, I used to mainly be thinking about going out to muster with the boys, or the men and my dad, and the school really didn't mean a great lot to me, and until I got up in years a little bit, and my old dad said, we're going to have to send Willie into town. He always called me Willie, not Bill, and so we're going to have to send Willie into town and board him there and do some, learn some about schooling. And so I spent 3.5 years in Claremont, and that was my total amount of schooling. But I really did enjoy the cattle work, the horses, and so fortunately for me, my dad getting a little bit long or old, and he decided that, you know, if I wanted to, I could come home to work, and that suited me fine until you know, I got with the ringers, and and they didn't give me anything extra. It was just I had to do what they did. But here I am today, and I don't think they really did me any great harm. But they were great old days, and it was it's great looking back. At the if I get a chance, I'll tell you just a couple of little stories later on in the thing about a couple of these ringers that we had there and what they did to me or what they did about. But I think they're quite amusing. But that's the life of me, and I'm still annoying the boys just a little bit and doing just a little bit out in the property and really enjoying the last little bit while I've got some of my faculties left. Thank you.
Okay, what about you, John? Recollections of primary school? Did you even go to school?
Never learnt much.
You learn how to rip cockies off.
That wasn't terrible hard to do because they were pretty simple. Yes, no, let's go back to school first. Born in Clermont. Herb's father was an accountant at Applin and Co, and we went along from there. Mum was a Muirhead. That was the end of that. Then I went to school. Ken had already been there, and we went to the convent, of course, and basically most of my school years were there up to scholarship. Half of my rode a pony to work to school and picked her up on the way home. I used to leave her in the old tin foos. Used to leave her in the old tin foos place, the old shoemakers. And then I spent half a day every day trying to catch her behind and hunt around the other side so I could get a look at what was going on in their place, all that sort of stuff. So very secretive they were, and and apart from that, played a bit of sport there and then went on with it from there. Finally I went to St Brendan's and had a couple of years there playing sport. Came home from there and had the wonderful pass of about 3 Cs. And Herb said, well, old fella, he said, well, you can go back to school next year. And I said, well, if you don't want me to waste your money, you better let me go bush or something. So I did. I went bush from there. I went to Mansion for 6 months and then on to Grosvenor and then come back into the town. So that was where that part, that's about the end of my schooling. And, never made any great hikes with bloody schooling.
But when you went to Grosvenor, you would have been working with your family, so they would have looked after you and given you a job. You wouldn't have to have really been that good for them to employ you, I suppose. No, I was fortunate enough to have no family there. Billy Applin was your cousin, you bloody liar. He owned it. But Billy Applin, I grew up under Billy Applin, and I don't think there's any better coach in the country than Billy Applin. And I spent my whole life using him as a guide for sale yards and everywhere else later on as he got older in life and that sort of thing. I reckon he was probably one of the best bushmen that I'd run across in this country.
I'm probably going a little bit, I knew this would happen, but while we're on that topic, 16, 17 years ago I was managing Grosvenor Downs, a place where John had spent a lot of time, and on weekends back in those days, I had a pretty good old mate who had the same birthday as me, and we had a fair bit in common. We had a love for horses and good cattle, and I used to go over there a little bit and help him muster on weekends, and he had a lot of age on him even then. I couldn't tell you how old he was, but his name was Charlie Floor. And we spoke about old times at Grosvenor and all sorts of different things, and somewhere in amongst all of this, the name John Eilert came up. And I said, did you have much to do with Eilert when he was a young fella ringing? And he said, to bed real early. Anyway, he told me a bit of a story about, he'd been at a draft, and prior to the draft there'd been an organisation that I think, anyway, I think how it went sort of when you had enough of the next door neighbour's cattle in the horse paddock, you'd made an arrangement, you'd go and meet on the boundary and you'd do a bit of a swapsy. He sort of said, I just can't remember the exact words, but they'd agreed to be at a certain time at daylight on the boundary fence, and Chaz said, I don't think that young Eilert thought I'd be there. Can you enlighten me on that story at all, Jack?
Yeah, well, I was left behind. The cattle had headed for home, and I was left behind till Charlie and Billy said, you mightn't make home till dark, mate. You better cut a big feed. So I cut a big lunch and sat there waiting and cooled my heels. And the recommended time was Charlie to be at the boundary by 10 o'clock. And the night before we'd been lying in the camp and he'd just won the Gold Cup in Winton, so you can imagine what chance he had of being at the back 10 mile out from Mount Lebanon to go to the boundary by next morning. But sure enough, he was there 10 o'clock right on the dot. He come camping up on Vicky and took the cattle home from there. So, you know, that story is true.
Well, there you go, yeah. Righto, well, just moving on down a bit, we're probably going to dart in and out of a few different conversations. John's got a few recollections. Do you want to do anything with them just yet, mate?
Oh, well, as we went on and got older and the cattle market, things changed. Remember, we all remembered about the dollar changes and some of the funny things that happened in the dollars. A lot of old fellas in the bush just hadn't caught up with what was going on. I was cattle buying by this stage. And I went down to old Eric Martell one day to look at a mob of bullocks and started to deal with him, offered him $120. And we were told that we were to start trading in dollars and forget the pound, shillings and pence and all that sort of stuff from the company. Just so the bush got used to it. Probably 3 or 4 months after dollars came in. And I battled with old Eric for a while. He's tearing the bark off the rails and he's kicking dirt everywhere. And he wasn't going to take it. And I said, well, I've got a brainwave then. I said, well, what about 60 quid, Eric? Yes, he said, why didn't you give it to me straight away? So needless to say, we went and had a smoke ale and that was a deal done.
What about Fainty? Talk to me, as a kid I can remember sitting around the table, listening to my grandfather talk, and I often still think about it today. Back in that era, you had fat cattle if you had a paddock with bullocks in it, and you might add 50 or 100 or whatever you thought were ready to go. I'm 53 years old and I've never seen it in my time, but talk to me a bit about, you know, whether when you rode out with the agent, have a look at the fat cattle. Did you cut them out there and then, or did you take them to a square, or did you walk the whole lot home? And how did all that go? And what is your opinion on having a look at your fat cattle on horseback with an agent by your side?
Yes, it was sort of going thing when then I started to take over. Mr. Charlie Tyndall used to buy a lot of our cattle. A friend down here did too in the latter times. But yes, they'd be all drafted. We'd put them into an area and draft the bullocks out on the one we felt were ready to go. And Mr. Tyndall would come along and say they were worth 40 pounds or 50 pounds or whatever, and that was sort of the going thing. You hardly ever argued, and I certainly didn't argue, because that was sort of the going rate, and till I got a little bit older, and I'm talking about the early stages of when I took over, and it was a bit difficult, but yes, that was the way we mainly sold everything on the hoof, in the paddock, drafted up, and even with John latter times.
So back in those earlier days when you rode out there with your agent and you're looking through the bullocks, was there talk of weight, or did he just say to you, if they're going to make the grade, Bill, I'll give you 30 pounds?
Exactly. That's it. Yep. I don't remember talking about too much weight, and that it was the look of the bullock and whether he was finished, and he was you know, a very, very solid old man, Mr. Tyndall, and yeah. But that was the way we sold for a good many years in my young life.
So, Bill, then you would have walked them to Blair Athol to truck, or what did you do with them after you sold them?
Yep, yes, we used to walk them to Blair Athol, and we'd usually mix with Mr. Moller from Recruit. He would normally sell his bullocks the same time, and we'd mix them, and a couple from each place would drive them to Blair Athol. We'd stay at the 23 Mile Yards the first night, and then go on into Johnson's the next night, and then truck that next afternoon, and yes, we draft, of course, the recruits from the pioneers at BA, and yeah, they were great old days, and it was a great way of using some of our young horses to take them onto the road and going quietly, and yeah, I got good memories of those old droving days.
And I guess not only we were riding horses more, but would it be fair to say that the cattle got a little bit more education than what they do today with all the handling, or do you think it'd be about on par, in your opinion?
Absolutely, no, that's right. We had more shorthorns, pole shorthorns in my time, and they were subject to having lots of musters because they were covered in ticks, and so we'd be shifting them every 3 or 4 weeks, months or something like that, to take them home, and they'd have to be driven back to the yard, put through a plunge dip, and but it was good for the horses, good for the men, and I don't think it hurt the cattle.
Yeah, okay. John, what sort of numbers, in the 50s, 60s, that sort of era, would you have been aware of, like, as opposed to of today, what was considered, if you were bringing in a big mob of bullocks in those days, yeah, let's just say the 60s, as opposed to today?
The big numbers came from back on the river. The Morays, Alf Curry used to bring them at about 400 to 500 at a time. Even when Dalgetty's owned it, they still walked their bullocks, and that was about the crossover time. It was about then. The rest, everybody walked. The Barcombe bullocks walked. Probably a couple of 100, 150, 200, whatever might have been. As you got onto the bigger places, you got bigger numbers of course, as you'd well and truly imagine. Yakamunda was one of the ones we used to get a fair bit of trouble with when I was even in the 80s. We'd start them and then they'd dip them or something like that before we could get on the road, and they'd spend 3 and 4 days in the river getting over the heat of the dip. All this sort of stuff. So there was a fair bit of to and fro went on, and there's times about dipping cattle, and some in arsenic dips and some in Vitic dips and whatever it was. They all had different effects on cattle and how they would work. But yes, that was normally about the way it went.
I don't think the withholding period was very particularly enforced in those days.
I don't think anybody understood what a withholding period was. Like a lot of things they didn't understand.
A topic for conversation between the three of you, in your opinion, in those old, we talk about fat cattle today and how many we load to a deck, and we don't want bruising and horn and all that sort of stuff. So, you go there, you muster a paddock of bullocks, you cut out the fat fellas, you join up with Mr. Moller, you walk them into BA, you've got to draft them again, and then away they go. Did we get much bruising? Did we lose much weight on them? Did they get knocked about, or on par with today when they're going on train and truck?
No, not at all. The cattle were very quiet, and we were taught to treat them pretty gently, and we'd draft them in the yards at Blair Athol on horseback, and no, they never knocked them about at all. I don't, except one day a white bullock knocked the gate open and went bush, and he was a nice big fat fella, and Dad was still with us at the time, and he said, "Willie," he said, "grab your horse and you better go chase that bullock." So I remember this bullock going straight down through Blair Athol, down the, and it was quite a big lump of town back in those days, and down the main street we went, Liberty Split, and came back, and there's an old lady, I've forgotten what her name was, and she had a big chook yard just near the railway station, and got this bullock, and I had a pretty good little bay mare, and I was coming through, and we went into this fowl house, straight in one side and out the other, chooks and ducks, and I could see this old lady over there, and I'm looking around, I'm thinking, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. She said, get at him, Bill, get at him. But so and I went down the flat and round and back into the yard, and we got him. So I was pretty popular with Dad and the crew, but I can still see this old lady coming out there, and I'm thinking, my gosh, she's going to be rousing. But she said, get at him, mate.
Willie, I think there would have been a fair bit of bruising happen at that stage, but most of it would have been at the pub after the train had loaded. There were a bunch of drovers that lived around that area, Frank Ivory, Alf Curry, Tommy Finger, bring cattle down the road, and Dad would let them use the Bendemeer yards at night. They'd put the mob in there overnight, come down through Kyra, a lot of those northern cattle, camp the first night camp the night before in Cairo at the junction of Western Creek. What do you remember? You remember what that waterhole was called? No, there's a waterhole there. They'd camp there, and then they'd bring them on to Bendemeer, then through to the Turkey's Nest, which is just the Claremont side of the overpass there on the railway line now, and then they'd through to the Blair Apple Yards that night. But, there were a mob of drovers, and most of them were fair characters. They spent a fair bit of time around the Blair Athol Yards waiting for the next contract, and while they waited there, I guess the pub was the best place to stay, just across the street from the trucking yards.
Do you remember the big concrete tank?
No, mate, I was only a young fella. I'm a lot younger than you. Just remember that. I don't remember much at all. I do remember one time Clive Alberts was bringing a mob in, and Clive was always happy when he was sad. Clive rode in the lead of the mob. Dad and I were in the old Land Rover, and he said, Steve, there's going to be a young fella come up here, ask you for some sugar. Don't give him any. Oh, why not, Clive? We got some sugar in the car here. He said, no, the bastard won't let his horse eat, so he's not getting sugar till he learns how to feed his horse. So when he rode up, of course, this young fella, you got any sugar in the car, boss? I just like some sugar. He said, no, we haven't got any sugar. We didn't have any sugar. And that's how you educated ringers. You just made it tough for them, and they took it and wore it, I suppose. And I imagine he got a bit of sugar when he got to the pub that night.
Droving teams, Clive Alberts was sort of more down the Bajana track from there to Bararathal. Mick Sam used to handle all the peak vales and all the cravens and all that coming in from this southern side. You had Alf Curry doing the morays and all that back there. Tommy Finger would do the bombandis to Tango. They'd all cross tracks here and there along the road, and there'd be cattle mixed up and all sorts of things, or cattle rush. Heaps of swearing and heaps of fighting going on, but anyhow, they'd get the tangles up and they'd get straightened up. Yeah, but anyhow, there were some pretty rare times with those old drovers, all right.
You got one more? There was another story that wasn't in my experience, but Tiger Floor told me about it one time, and he was a young bloke droving with Alf Curry, and Alf is like Clive Alberts, only entirely different. Alf was happy when he was cranky. He was a different sort of kettle of fish. But they didn't camp at Bendemeer, they camped at the Myclare turnoff there, just on the right-hand side of the road, and they're on a bit of a black soil flat. And they only one day from there to the sale yard, so it wasn't too bad. So they were just about out of water, and they drank the last water in the billy, made tea that night and drank the last water. And during the night, Alf woke up and had a green ant that got into his ear. It was chewing the hell out of his ear, and he said to Tiger was a young fellow, he said, get some water out of that billy and tip it in my ear. And Mr.
You don't
Curry,
want to hear the rest of it?
Mr. Curry, there's no water left in the billy. We drank it all for our tea last night. He said, well, piss in me here then. So Tig was only a young fella, but he had to pee carefully to just fill the ear and not overflow, as you'd understand. So he gently peed in his ear. The green ant stopped biting, and it all ended up okay. But it was the precision and the accuracy of the operation that Tig felt he'd really done a great job. And I think he might have got a pay bonus. He probably got an extra sandwich or smoker or something.
That's a hard act to follow, isn't it?
I tell you what. Rightio.
But that wasn't in my time. I'm younger than that.
Just while we're in that sort of an era, obviously the changes in transport. We talk about walking cattle. Now we truck cattle. They go on trains. Open for conversation. Any three of you can pick up on this one. So how do you feel the direction we're heading with cattle these days? Do you think if it wasn't for time and if we weren't in such a rush and maybe a lack of a workforce, would we still be doing those days droving and walking them into trains or into cattle stations, into yards where they could be trucked? Or how do you feel about how times have changed?
Yeah, well, we've changed the breed of cattle to start with. I can remember most of the herds were Shorthorn or Hereford. We've gone from, a lot of people changed from there. Brahma cross came in, then that wasn't enough. The next cross was Yarralays and Limousin's and all the next breed. And then every 10 or 15 years we kept on changing the breeds. That it made a big difference as to where and, how cattle handled. Because even trucking those cattle, it was, say a deck of cows was 22 to 24 Shorthorn cows to a truck. And then we got back to the stage where you're on 18s to 20s of the crossbred cattle. So it just gave you an impression that those herd was gradually improving and weight-wise and so forth. And so therefore, more result for the grazier. That's why all the big hats are here. That's why the money's so good.
Rightio. I don't know, but we should mic him up, I reckon, yeah. I did a little bit of research on, again, I'm only young, and I did a bit of research on the cattle slump in the 70s and sort of 74 to 78 when it was a bit tough. And then I tried to go through for central Queensland and in our area. I haven't asked you fellas this before, but my research indicates that in the cattle slump, the country itself and the seasons actually weren't too bad. Right or wrong, I don't know, but no doubt we're about to find out. So, a couple of questions into one. Were the seasons with you guys or against you guys in the cattle slump in the 70s? And on both sides of the fence, from a cattle buyer to a grazier, how did everyone survive getting through these situations? Like cattle would, we were just about giving cattle away. So obviously when you can't sell cattle, you're not generating too much money. We wouldn't have had computers, internet, research like we can all do today to get a bit of information to make an opinion on ourselves. Like we had no phones or bugger all phones. And we're probably relying a fair bit on our agent or what the bloke before us had done. So just open to discussion, who would ever like to pick up on it. Were the seasons any good during the cattle slump, and was that like a small helping? There's nothing worse when cattle money's no good and you've got no grass and you've got to sell, you're really bent over a battle. But anyway.
Yep, well that's right, Mark. Is that coming through okay? Yeah, they were great seasons, and I think some people made some sort of a mistake. They didn't keep trading, and I think they had a little more problem than some of us. We didn't like it when the buyers would come along. I remember one time about the middle of the slump, and I got my friend here to come out and have a look at a couple of decks of beautiful maiden spayed heifers, and they were proper good out there, I can tell you. Anyway, he said, what sort of money are you looking for? And I said, Oh, they're really good, John. I think around about that 32, 33 bucks. And he looked at me, he said, you want to sort of get into where the market really is, Bill? He said, and I said, well, what do you reckon? He said, well, the best I can do for you, and I'm really throwing at you, is, really sorry, he said. And he said, I'll give you 22 bucks for them. So that was, but I kept on trading, and that's where I believe that some people did go wrong. It was a sad part of the time, but I'll never forget that with these lovely heifers, and he still laughs about it. And but I think that those who traded came out the other end okay.
And to be fair, Bill, while you might have lost on those cattle, I do believe that you and a mate of yours called Dowie Hicks went out west somewhere and bought a herd from some other poor bugger and
And overpaid him, of course.
and you probably did quite well on that deal, did you? Can you remember that deal?
This will be painful. You listen to what he paid for.
I thought everyone would have forgotten about that.
Not one.
But it was we didn't do anything wrong, Hicksy and I. We just went out and they decided they wanted to sell these cattle, right? So we had to muster them, we had to draft them, and we had to shift them. We had to do everything, and I'm not going to mention the guys' names. Anyway, we got through, and I think we shifted about 200 out in the back of the truck, and we hadn't even made a deal with them or paid anything. Anyway, I said to Hicksy, we're going to have to do something with these guys. So, but anyway, so they both flew over in an aeroplane and landed beside us. And anyway, Hicksy said, like he always used to, or Fainty, he said, you're the best talker. He said, you tell them what we're going to pay for them. And I said, you and I haven't discussed what we're going to pay for them. And he said, well, it's not going to be very much. And I said, we're going to give them 10 bucks or something like that. Oh my God, no, he said, I reckon about $5. And the calves thrown in. So, and these two guys were leaning up against this little aeroplane, and they just skidded straight down the side of the plane and fell on the floor. And there was nothing poor beggars could do, I suppose, because we got the rest of the cattle in the yard. That was, I did feel a little bit, just a little bit.
That was one of his early starts in life.
And I know poor old Dowie's not here to defend himself, but Claire, you might back me up here that I'm not sure that it happened all exactly quite like that. I think Hicksy was prepared to pay a bit more, but he was undercut by his mate. Perhaps, I'm not sure.
Take no notice, my friends, take no notice. I'm giving you the truth.
Fainty, what did you turn them around for? Did you fatten them up and sell them, or?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We split. Was there a party?
A margin.
Was there a good margin?
No, there was a party after. Hicksy and I had a party after we fattened them up and sold them. But it was one very strange time.
I remember one old fellow at the same time, and then in '73, I offered him $60 for Oates bullocks. And he said no way in the world he wasn't going to cop $60. So the oats run out, and the season rained that you asked the question about. It was a good season, and kept on going around. He grew a sorghum crop the next year. In June the following year, I paid him 25. And he said, I've nearly picked up the interest rates on that. So that was just one of the times that, just through not going, and the worst part about it, as Jono said earlier, a lot of fellas, there was a good few fellas went clean out the door through not trading. That was where they followed the wheel round, they would have got back in on the $5 stuff like Bill was, but no, they hung on till they sort of missed the boat altogether.
Just while we're on the subject of the 74-78 slump, it's out there for debate, but in you guys' time, have you ever seen it? Do you think between now and then it's ever been as bad as then? Do you think it's the worst one you've seen in your time?
Of course it is. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, without doubt. Yeah, we've never seen anything like that before, and hopefully we'll never see it again. But what I was just saying a while ago, the thing was to keep trading. It was not much good trying to fight it. Trade and go down with it, and you know, and most of us sort of got through in a way. And then towards the finish, when and the seasons were good, but you know, we did okay.
Well, most of you'd remember, as soon as we came out of that, we were into 24% interest. Remember those fellas that got bitten with 24% interest, they weren't making much of a hole in anything with that, you know, so it was pretty hard going.
Yeah, there's all sorts of setbacks, and I mean the last 3 years of cattle prices have gone from $6 a kilo back to $2.50, $3 a kilo. Anyone who bought steers at $6 a kilo has probably not made a lot of money out of them in the last couple of years, and I know one bloke who's done that, and it hurts, but you just got to keep trading, that's the thing.
You're lucky you had a few fellas to get you out of jail.
Mate, I've never had so much fun with the cattle buyers as I've had in the last couple of years. There's some real fellas with blokes out there buying cattle now that have got a heart. They're really nice blokes.
They weren't lasting the job very long.
I knew you'd come back with something there, Wiley.
At 74, at the time I was out at Supplejack out in the middle of West Australia, 800k to Alice Springs.
When Stephen was looking for you.
Well, he needed me, but I needed space. So I was out there, Bob had cattle there, bullocks ready to sell. The calculation was $12 a head to get them into Alice Springs, and they're going to be worth $10 to put on a train then. Not a lot of joy in that, and cattle stayed there. They just...
So that's when you went fruit picking?
No, mate, no, fruit picking was earlier than that. That's why the cattle in the cattle slump wasn't that bad. It was better than fruit picking.
Rightio. Improvements in country. I remember after my dad passed away, we were sort of cleaning some stuff up, and I found a book. Earlier, John spoke of Kilcummin blocks, and my grandfather drew a block called Wingvic, and in years to come, they bought out the next door neighbour, which was Niagara, where some of my family still are today. And there was a book there, and don't quote me on the numbers, and I couldn't really tell you the size of the paddock, but at the front of Niagara, there's a paddock we call a bullock paddock, and at any one time of the year, there could be 400 head of cattle in there, from steers up to bullocks ready to go. Anyway, I found this book of Herb Watts's, and it wasn't a diary as such, but it was a bit of direction somewhere along the lines when Dad finished up with Niagara, and Herb's wife had found out about this. We finished up with this book, and the same front paddock was wall-to-wall scrub, hardly a blade of grass in it, and it was called the front paddock back in those days, and it had the front paddock will hold 85 breeders for 10 months of the year, and then you've got to bring it back to 29. And today they run 400 there. So just the improvements in country, and just a little bit of stimulation. I'm talking, and you fellas might come up with some more, but buffel grass, blade plough, polypipe, laneways, shortening of paddocks, time controlled grazing, spelling paddocks, grasslands, solar. Like, what is your opinion on all the way we can improve our country now and run a bit more cattle, and what's the feel? You know, from the buyer's side, you've seen the way the cattle come through from the same properties over years that have been improved. Are they better or not?
Well, just a short one. The southern side of Clermont was always regarded as, prior to buffalo grass and polypipe, it was always regarded as second and third class country. Then you had the desert country back behind Lagland and all that. All that country's completely and utterly changed since the scrub pulling and since water and polypipe and all the other the mod cons, and the numbers have gone up. The carrying capacities have improved out of sight. So therefore, it must have been a benefit to have that development.
And what about the quality of the cattle, like as opposed to?
That's subject to the bloke that's buying the bulls. That should be buying bulls.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment, Jack. The cattle have changed a lot. Early years of showing cattle, I remember bringing bullocks in 900 kilos. We brought one heavyweight bullock in. It used to be the heaviest bullock of the show. It was 1,500 kilos we were aiming for, and we had one at 1,500 kilos. Never done it since, and you wouldn't be game to do it now because these fellas would give you a flogging. But that was the aim, was big and heavy, and that's still the aim, big and heavy, but the only thing we've changed is big and heavy and young. That we've taken the age off those cattle by the crossbreeding programs that we have now. Wasn't available, we didn't, we had short-ons. That was about where you started, and the short-on fellas were never as smart as the Hereford fellas, from what I can recall. But that's just how it went.
Some of them still got them, don't know how to pay them.
But the other thing that's changed dramatically, the 69 drought, we had a hell of a time, and it wasn't much different to the first half of this year. It was just that we had early rain in 68, then didn't get rain late 68, early 69, and we had a lot of cattle lost at that time. And one of the things we did was we fed the breeders. Bill Hooper and Peter Lund were bringing peanut hay up from the south, and we'd get a semi-load at a time and drop it out. You'd make your own lick blocks. We had a cracking machine. We'd had sorghum in the silo. We'd crack it, mix it with urea, mix in some salt, set into some sort of a block in a half 44-gallon drum, and then you'd spend half your week making it and the other half putting those drums out, and then go around and pick them all up again when they were empty and rebatch them and put them out. But one thing that my dad taught me after that was never feed hay. If you're going to survive a drought, don't feed hay. It's a never-ending process, and you get into a cycle where you can't stop. You must keep going. Sell rather than smell. That was the recommendations he had, and I've stuck to that pretty much ever since. But the other thing we've got now that we didn't have then was the ability to transport cattle quickly and easily to different parts of the country. But there's a drought in Claremont, that might be rain at Cloncurry, cattle can move around, and the safety valve in that is being able to move those cattle before they get too poor to truck. That's made a hell of a difference, I reckon, Jack.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Just a lot of fellows that were caught like down here now, we've converted cattle country into farming country. Take Langton, for instance, down the road here, Australian breeders. Ralph Hunter, the manager there, one year, he brought me up 6 bullocks put on the train, and that made it 4,000 bullocks all partly for the year. These little bally bullocks that they brought out of the north, the Australian breeders, stock breeders, before they cut that black soil up. And so we've lost all cattle everywhere through coal mines, and there's a big heap of cattle going down the drain. The cattle that were available to us before aren't available to us now through coal mines and farming.
And yet through property development, land development, blade plows, the ability to spread cattle with polypipe, the actual cattle numbers in Australia are higher now than they ever were. And a lot of that is related to the job that you guys do in developing your properties and running more cattle at a younger age.
What about you, Fanny? Have you got anything to add to that? One of your favourite improvements, or something that's really stood out to you in your time that's been a big benefit to our industry?
Well, I think what John was just saying, that certainly that has improved. We don't have near the problem with droughts as we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. Just simply because we've got the feed, we've got improved country, and we've just about everywhere you go, it's all been improved compared to what it was when I was a lout getting around. And You know, it's and the supplements that you got, you know, that you can feed now, and it doesn't break the world. I mean, if you start feeding a little bit early and keeping them going and making sure you wean your calves and looking after things. But no, I think you know, I believe that most of the people out there now are smarter than probably where they were probably 40, 50 years ago.
In the 70s, I'd say the northern Australia, from not here, but Charters Towers North, there were very few breeders that were ever sold as cull cows. They died on the farm. They died on the property, and that's changed dramatically up in that
That's
area.
right.
The calving percentages up there were 30 to 40% calving, and the cows just survived and got a bit of condition on them and got them calf again the next year. Now they're the skills that we have in preg testing and property management have made a hell of a difference to that, and that's why the cattle numbers and the turnover and the flow rate is so much better. The other thing we have now is the feedlotting industry that is evening out supply. It used to be entirely dependent on when you had rain, you have fat cattle after rain. Now you have fat cattle most of the year, and the rain helps to even out the rain helps to improve our pasture production, but the feedlotting is providing the base for the abattoir section and holding a value that's reasonable there.
Yeah, Jumbo, you've probably just capped off into the next question of this section, and in general, are we happy with the way the rural industry is heading?
As Gilly once said to me, happy but never satisfied.
What do you think, John?
I think it's gone lapse in a few places, and the DPI is one of them. We've grown up with stock inspectors scratching cattle for ticks. We could never come into a sale yard. You couldn't have ticks on cattle. If you did, Stocky'd do his walk and he'd come by and just mark your gate and say dip. End of story, and you were up for your dip. Now, yards everywhere are just an absolute mess with ticks, left, right and centre. And the boys at home don't realise they're not showing up when they're at home, but they definitely show up here next day. And there's a lot of cattle that shouldn't be fronting up, which the DPI fellows would have been right on to. And now we've got no DPI at all, like since, you know, our favourite little mate, old Lynn Jones, permits for us. Well, you know, there's no such a thing as a permit anymore. Well, you just could not move at all without a permit. So there's no regulation on the industry much at all as far as the ability of what those cattle or where they're available to go to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've never really thought about it like that. What about you, Tony?
Yeah, certainly that's true, but we don't have the problem with the ticks now like that we did when we just had all shorthorns and Herefords. You know, with the crossbred cattle, we don't have much problem at all, and if you're just a little bit careful with them, it's not a problem. But when I was a young fellow, we used to muster about every 3 to 4 or 5 weeks just to dip, bring those lot up and dip, then another lot, another 4 or 5 weeks. But now we don't have that problem, and I think it's the crossbred cattle that we've got. You know, they're just much more tolerant to the tick.
For sure. Rightio, well that sort of completes that section. We'll just move on to just a few questions, a few individual questions. We might start with I've just got 4 words for you. And you can.
Good place to start, and then we'll tell the truth.
Well, this one here goes back to when he was fairly young, so he could probably tell a few lies and not too many people would pick him up on it. But I did hear stories a long time ago, and I'm sure they were true, but just 4 words, and you can make of it what you want. And the 4 words are caddy on a pony. Now, I think about this, a caddy, obviously a golf caddy, on a pony. But anyway, I'll let you tell us a story about that one.
I don't know who's been feeding him this rubbish, but anyhow. I had a good grey pony at the time, lived next to John Bennett, and John Bennett always had horses. I used to ride work with on the old, not the full grain-fed fellas, but the old horses when they first came in. And Hazel Bennett and I'd ride in pairs together, work them in pairs. We'd go down across that golf course and straight across, and then I finished up with a pony at home. Of course, she was getting, I told you, I used to ride into school. Well, she used to come home with me of an afternoon, get a free feed for John Bennett over the fence with the grain-fed horses out in Eton. And so, needless to say, that was one of the... I've just lost my track there now, I'll have to go back.
You're right, in regards to your grey pony and caddying.
Oh yeah, right. So John Bennett was a golfer, and so was Alan Millard, who run the Claremont Telegram. And they had those old wooden handles and that sort of thing, and 2 bags, and I'd hook them up over my shoulder, they'd drive off, and I'd drop the bag on John's ball and keep riding to the island and drop that and get full pay about a bob a week. Bob an afternoon for that. So that was big money.
And you followed it through by being one of the best golfers there is in Claremont. So you must have a love for golf when you were a young fella.
No, that's a long time ago and I can't remember that.
I did mention before, ladies and gentlemen, they don't want to be heroes, but I'm just telling you how I see it. Fainty, I could only but imagine in the 60s, we're in a community where we just spoke about, we're all about horses. I have a big love for horses. My grandfather had a love for horses and I've been around them all my life and just love horses to death. But I still rattle my brain trying to get my head around where somebody in the 60s gets an idea to go to America and import a quarter horse into an area where everyone's riding short Paston thoroughbreds and stock horses and good crosses and great drafting horses, and this accredited camp drafter from Claremont jumps on a plane, gets himself over into America in the 60s, and to the best of my knowledge, I think he was probably the first person to privately import a quarter horse into Australia when I did my research. Now, it would have taken a lot of pluck, there would have been a lot of hecklers, like where did the idea come from and how does it sit with you today? You obviously imported 4 more, I think, down the track, 5 in total. So Hoss Fistel is the horse I'm talking about, and his bloodlines are still there and a lot of camp horses today, more than many. Where did the idea come from? Surely you would have known there was going to be hecklers and there would have been a lot of pressure on you to do something pretty special with a horse that you've gone across the other side of the world with to bring back here to Claremont. Can you give us a little insight in that, mate?
I shall do my best. Yeah, well, my father and grandfather both bred horses and very good ones. I can always remember him talking about Lucy, Jenny and Spider.
You're right.
Lucy, Jenny and Spider back before the turn of the century. And I can always remember my dad saying that it was very difficult to get to go out and buy a stallion that had some cow sense, because they all come from the racing area or just about. So it was very difficult. You'd buy a horse and a stallion and then you'd breed these foals and you wouldn't know for at least 4 or 5 years whether they had any cow sense. Whereas when I read about the quarter horses, that's what they were born and bred to, to working stock and roping, and when I thought, well, that's got to be, the right place, and you can't make, too much of a mistake there. Yes, lots of people said to me, well, Fainty, what are you trying to do? You're just trying to be smart and get something so that somebody else hasn't got. But when you had the opportunity of going over and seeing the horses work over there, cutting and racing, doing everything, they certainly were probably no better than the very best that we had in Australia. But we saw so many good stallions at racing, but then when they came out to breed stock horses, you'd want to be lucky with, you might have them for 5 years and, the stock don't turn out too good. So that's what made me think pretty serious about it. The biggest problem that I could see when was how I was going to select it, how I was going to get it here, and that you know, those sort of things did come. But Primac were excellent. They Wilco and them, they got onto these horses, and we picked out a particular one that we wanted. Then not only did we buy it, then he had to go to England for 6 months in quarantine, then be shipped out to Australia. So it was just about a 12-month period. But I never regretted it. He, you know, he was certainly, don't say that he was better than a lot of the horses that we had here, and we still have, but you know, the amount of time that you'd had to take to find out whether, you know, whether they were going to have any cow sense, and so that's what made me go to the quarter horse, and I never, you know, I never regretted it.
No, and good on you. Like, you know, you go to some of the biggest camp drafts and rodeo sports in Australia these days, and the percentage of quarter horses they're everywhere. And I guess it was from the likes of people like yourself who, you know, bear in mind this was in the 60s. The logistics of getting over there, having a look at horses, getting around and getting it home, it would have nearly just got too hard thinking about it for most. But you had a passion, you stuck to it, and off the back of that, there's a lot of quarter horses in our country today, which is, you know, congratulations on bringing them into our country.
Yeah, well, that's very true, and it was a bit of a gamble, but not that big a gamble that I could see, because they you could see them working on the films, and then when I went over to see them actually working stock and racing, and they could do everything that our stock horses could do, but we didn't have enough pedigreed ones here. I'd see them next door to me at Bankery, which was a pretty big place when I was a little fella, getting around, and probably have 6 or 8 ringers, and they would buy a stallion and breed some horses, and then they'd break them in, and about 5 years later they'd find out they had no cow sense at all. They weren't worth a tinker's curse, and so all those good mares that they had, you know, were just wasted. So, and now, as you say, you get quarter horses. I certainly didn't buy them like some people thought. Oh yeah, old Fainty's going out there and going to make a bit of his name for himself. But that wasn't the thing at all. I certainly went because, you know, I'd read about them, and they were.
Good, you had the money.
I had to get a big loan, John.
You were helping out.
But anyway, that's how I come into them, and I never looked back. And now, it's, you know, Barkley says they're all out throughout Australia.
It's pretty hard to appreciate just the impact that decision of Fainty those years ago made to horses in our area. We had the saddle shed was down part of the old shearing shed, and out from there was a patch of basalt rock sticking out of the ground. They had the ringers with their young horses, lead them out in the middle of those rocks, and you reckon they had 2 reasons why it worked well. The ringer wasn't going to fall off because he hurt himself on the rocks, and the horse couldn't get a proper go at him because he was falling over rocks all the time. And it was a pretty good theory, but the other option would probably to have imported quarter horses, but Dad had some bloody good horses, and I think Fainty's herd benefited greatly from pinching horses. Oh, no, I mean buying horses from Dad. And that probably got him started, that he had the right foundations when he put the quarter horses over him.
You just can't beat him, can you?
Good old Mr. Flight Captain, I think,
I've been mixing with this fella for a long time, and I don't think I've ever had one win yet, but I've gone close a couple of times.
I think you buy your way out of trouble every time. You're right.
Just Fainty, a quick one, excuse me, while we're talking about that sort of stuff. In 2017, my son Leighton was sort of fairly mad on the rodeo circuit. We were down in Victoria. I'd never been to rodeos in Victoria before. He was chasing Australian title and conned me into going down there with him, and He was about 16 at the time, and on this particular day we were at a place called Merrijig, I think, and Leighton had won the steer ride, the junior bull ride, the second division bull ride, and the second division bareback. And the announcer was a fellow called Terry Murray. He used to announce up here at Claremont Radio a lot. And he kept saying, the boy from Claremont this, the boy from Claremont that, the boy from Claremont this. And anyway, Leighton had had a good day. I went to the bar, and I'm standing at the bar having a beer, and this old fella comes up to me and says, he said, I was just watching the radio there today, mate, and that kid you were helping on, that boy from Claremont, is he yours? And I said, yeah, he is mine. He said, I used to come up into Queensland a bit and have a bit of a look around. He said, there was a fella from Claremont, he was a real good hand. He said, I wonder if he's still alive. And I said, well, I wonder too. I said, what's his name? He said, Bill Faint, do you know him? I said, yeah, I do. I know Bill. And he said, great cattleman, great horseman, buck jump rider, and calf roper. I said, no, I knew a bit about him, but I don't think he ever roped calves. And he said, anyway, he told me a bit of a story.
Probably be better if he stopped there. It's still going to his head.
Well, I just want to know if it's true or not. And he named a few names and told me that he'd done some terrific things and beat a guy in Australia at calf roping that everyone wanted to beat. Now, you can take me off from this, Fainty, but is this a true story? Are we there is more than one Bill Faint or not? Or
There's only one Bill Faint, I think.
do you have any idea what he was talking about?
I certainly do. I don't think he ever forgave me. It was Chilicini, all right. I was pretty good mates with him, really, but yeah, me not a rodeo man. Camp drafting, yes, I was pretty reasonable. But anyway, I think it was a spring show, and it was a pretty big roping contest. And anyway, and Chilla was there, and we went out, and he made a reasonable time. Somehow or another, I went out and flipped like that, caught this calf, bombed it. Anyway, and I beat him. He never ever did forgive me.
You tell me you're a part-time roper. I thought I read somewhere once you've been third in the average at Mount Isa. No?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So I have done a bit of research.
You have.
You get a trouble in school about not researching.
Oh, yeah.
Fainty's gone into retirement. That's why Mount Isa's gone into receivership.
You could always help them out, though.
Yeah, that really was quite funny that I was out at Mount Isa doing the camp drafting, of course, and I used to go out there just about every year there, Cloncurry, Mount Isa, and anyway, and I didn't have the mare that I roped with out there, and yeah, and that's how I come to get on this grey horse of
Bonnie Young?
Bonnie Young. And Young, he said to me, he said, Bill, he said, you aren't you going in the roping? So he must have seen me catch one somewhere before. And I said, well, I don't have a horse. And he said, here, get on this grey horse here. And he was just some animal to go there. And I jumped on this horse, and anyway, I raced out there, and this horse, and I just threw the rope and went round the steer's neck and took and grabbed him there, and I ended up, yeah, I think second, third or fourth or something at Mount Isa, and yeah, that was the biggest fluke that you ever saw.
Bear in mind, none of you guys are old enough to question whether this is a true story or not, so just be careful.
Well, I have seen it written in paperwork up there at the Isa, so there must be a little
I
bit
believe
of
it.
Righto, Jumbo.
Uh-oh.
I sort of had to do a fair bit of research on Eilert and Fainty, but as soon as I think of Jumbo, I sort of grew up as a child, spending a lot of time with Bendemeer as a kid, and learned a lot about cattle, horses myself, and how to hold myself, and looked up to John and Jan a lot, and Mr. and Mrs. Burnett. They were very lovely people, and they were very great friends to the Marks family. And I remember in 2003, I think I was at Grosvenor Downs, and I bought the newspaper, and I'd heard a bit of gossip about all this sort of stuff, and I think the headline was something like Nebo Consortium purchased Stanbroke Pastoral Company. At the time, this was considered to be the largest rural land transaction in Australia, and whose name was attached to it, as well as others, was a one John Burnett from Claremont. I've never really got to ask Jumbo the question. I used to ride around on a horse, and to this day, I still think about those sorts of things. And Jumbo being a fairly astute character, but how does a conversation start, Jumbo? You're a bloke here in Claremont. You've got plenty of dirt under your feet. You're fairly hopping. Your boys are growing up. Then are you in the toilet having a leak, and some bloke walks up to you and says, "Hey, are you interested in coming in something with us?" Or was it a calculated meeting somewhere? Or how do you even get to have a look into something like that?
Got a loan from Paddy, didn't you?
He's still going for that. Yeah, no, Wade, it's a good question that I've often asked. How do you get that opportunity? Because it was an opportunity. It was a lot of fun putting it together. A fair bit of acid in the back of the throat when it all fell apart and we had to settle down. But it was, yeah, one of those things. My mum always said, "You never ever know if you never ever go." Yeah, I guess it was a bit. I don't think we were having a leak, but we were having a talk, and Ralph Ray, who was a mate from school, Wally Ray's brother, and Wally is a mate of Peter Hughes, and Peter and Wally had been talking, and Ralph must have overheard, and he saw me, or I saw him at somewhere, and you want to have a go at this Stanbroke thing? And I thought, that's a hell of a long way out of our part of the world, and yeah, I guess the opportunity was there. We bought a ticket in the lottery and put a lot of time into thinking it all through. Had a couple of financial fellas that came in with us. Jack Cowan from Hungry Jack's. He was keen to get involved. Peter Managaza, whose daughter Claudia was here today with Richard Sheriff. Her family ended up with the Stanbroke Pastoral Company business. They had the money, we had the enthusiasm, and I was full of bullshit, and it all worked. It just, it all came together. There's no formula to make it work. It's just when you see an opportunity, and it's a bit like Faindy with his quarter horse. It's that you see an opportunity, you think this could be worth a try, and you have a go. And that's what Faindy did. He didn't know the quarter horse was going to change the world in Australia, but it did. And I think the Stanbroke deal, in a lot of ways, changed the real estate values and market of land in Australia. The fact that a big corporate had sold to a bunch of families into private enterprise, I think there's a big change in the thinking of people that actually we can do this. We can grow our businesses, and we can hold it together. And as I say, there was a lot of heartache when it all started crumbling down and falling apart. But we ended up out of that whole deal with Frankfield, and yeah, I'm not too sad about that. That was pretty good. A lot of fun had.
No, well, good on you. And yeah, no, it's just, maybe I should have just rang you and asked you. I rode around for weeks, months and years thinking about how you fell into those sorts of things.
I probably couldn't have told you anyway, mate.
Rightio, well, we're not too far away from wrapping things up. I've probably got one here that I haven't even really prepped you on much, but this will be just one for all. This was just one. I'm not even sure what it means, but I read something somewhere and I heard a yarn about it one day, and it was something to do with Rusty Sorensen versus Roger Sattler. Any ideas there at all?
They're playing cricket.
Yeah.
Playing cricket. Sattler was the boss of Elders and told me he could bowl. I was thinking captain of Mistake Creek cricket. Rusty Sorensen was Renegades captain on the other side. Fainty to remember his hands getting blown off about everybody else would. But anyhow, he took to this Sattler, and the madder Sattler, the shorter Sattler dropped the ball, the further Rusty hit him. Finished up, they used to race down past the state school in those days off that old concrete pitch, and finished halfway to the hospital. That's how far he was hit them, but that's the story of it.
Yeah, well, there you go. That is one that I have heard before. I guess that just about wraps it up. Bainey, you got one? Yep.
Yes, I'd just like to tell you just a couple of short stories about some marvellous things that happened that I was mixed up with, and giving you a bit of an idea of how good some bushmen and some people are. I remember Mr. Moller and my dad went over to a place over near Alpha and bought 12 shorthorn bulls. This was a way back, I'm not sure what year it was. So John Kleins and I were the two that Dad said to go and bring these bulls home. They, no floats, of course, in those times. It was in 1950 and quite a bit of rain about. So John and I saddled up these two horses, took one each on the pack horse, and we set sail. And we rode over to Isle of Plains that first night, camped there and left really early the next morning, went up to this other place, and Mr. Otto Dalkey was there. I'm sure some people have heard of the Dalkeys, but anyway, that was not part of it. And we picked these 12 bulls up and set sail for Pioneer. John said, as we come out the big yard gate, he said, "We'll go straight home, Bill. We'll ride straight to Pioneer. It'll be going through the back end of Bankery." And I said, "We've never been in there. How are we ever going to?" He said, "We'll get there." Raining like mad, clouds everywhere. And we only had about 30 mile to go. But the first 20 mile was just, I got no idea where we were. And I said, "Well, where are we going to camp tonight? What are we going to do with the bulls?" And he said, he never told me how he ever got there, but he said, "I did see that there is an old bore there, and there's a tank we could camp under, and there's a wire yard." So I said, "Okay," and we set sail. Anyway, we got there, and we spent the night, and I didn't know all day, and then all the next day, we plunged through this water, and by the time we got to Pioneer, Mistake Creek was all over the flat. We had to swim that, and at last I found somewhere that I knew where I was. But for 2 days, I don't know how that man just rode straight through that top end of Bankery. I don't know, there'd be some people here would have an idea just how big it is. That was one of the most incredible things that I've seen, but I've just seen one more than that, and I'm sure that I'm not going to get into trouble telling this story, but
Trouble's not a problem.
yeah, Bill Murphy was the head stockman on Bankery, and he was keeping company with my sister at the time, and they were camped there, and it just absolutely teemed rain, and the flood was all over the flat. Anyway, he said arrive at Pioneer, but Bill, and I said, "How did you get here?" And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I rode my horse on the other side, swam the creek and swam across the flat and came up to the house." And by this, anyway, he stayed there and had a feed. And I said, "Well, you're going to have to stay the night. You just can't go out into that raging flood." And he said, No, I'll be right, Bill." So I walked down and I thought, that'll be the end. I'll see poor old Bill. And so he just stripped all his clothes off, tied it to his head, and he dived into the gully, which was about from here to that fence over there, and that was running really swiftly. And then I could hear him going out for the next quarter of a mile or a bit further. And then he swam the creek, got on his horse and rode back. And I reckon I would never see him again. And for some God up there or something got him through, but I reckon it was one of the most incredible things that you could possibly see, this fella just plunging into this water at midnight and this rushing flood waters, and he made it, and it's been stuck in the back of my head all my life. It really was incredible.
Yeah, they certainly are good yarns, and it is incredible. It probably is a little bit of a trait we lose in the bush these days with GPSs and all
Yeah.
sorts of things to keep us nice and safe and found and what have you.
No phones.
No phones, and those old fellas, and yeah, they had some incredible skills, that's for sure. That is for sure. Jumbo, do you have anything else?
No, mate, I knew a bloke once who walked cattle all the way to Hobart from Queensland.
Want to know which way to go?
Did he swim across?
No, we said, well, what about Australia? He said, no, I didn't go that way. No, I've got nothing more to add except that all the yarns that we can tell you will be repeated by another group, and the young guys that are here today are just as capable, just as skilled, just as good at taking opportunities as any of us are. It's about seeing a chance and having a go, and that's one thing that we do well in this community is we have a go. If you keep having a go, you'll get a few things wrong, you'll make a few mistakes, but I don't know, Faindy probably never made any, but I'm sure I would have made a few mistakes, and I'm probably just a little bit worse than him, but we got to have a go, and don't give up thinking and trying. Like we got bloody dieback coming in our pasture. There's ways that we can fix that if we just keep working at it. But we'll get there. It's all okay. Our cattle market might not be perfect, but we'll get there. Just keep hanging in there, keep trading, and stay in the game. That's the main.
Yep, well, I just like to say thank you to all the people that have put up with us this afternoon, and it's been a bit of a real pleasure to have this opportunity of speaking to you, and it's certainly been wonderful. So thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really thank you for your attention. On behalf of Hock and Wilkinson, for getting these three guys here. Like I said, these guys don't consider themselves famous or heroes or legends. I enjoyed listening to their yarns when I was a little fella sitting on the bar stool after a cattle sale.
You're too young, you shouldn't have been there.
I hope you got as much out of this as we did today, and I'd sincerely like to thank these fellas. Put a lot on the line up here, and we all understand we're all getting a bit old, and they're just a shade older than us, and we do forget things. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was well received, and don't forget about 2:30. I think. Oh, it's nearly 2:30 now. I think there might be just a short break, and I think we get underway with the presentations. I hope you enjoyed yourselves.
So TJO's beers.
TJO, Luke Jackson's here. He sort of jumped on board with Timmy O'Brien's seed business. There's beers up here in the esky, I believe, if you want to have a beer. Thanks, Jacko, for coming on board. So if you want a beer, slip up here, grab a beer and take a seat. And I'm pretty sure the boss will let me know that we'll probably get underway with the presentations pretty quick.
Well done, Tony. Thank you. Good work, mate. Thanks, mate. Good. Well
Thanks, mate. Thanks for helping us through.
Good work. You did well.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thanks.